Hello and welcome to the Corporate Wellness Therapist channel. I am Dr. Natalie Jones and I am a corporate wellness therapist, and it's my mission to help corporations remove toxicity and incivility in the work environment so that they can become a thriving and inclusive, productive workplace. It's been a while since I've done a podcast for business consulting with Dr. Jones. And I kind of wanted to talk today for a little bit about a phenomenon called quiet firing, or workplace mobbing. And quiet firing is basically, it's like reverse discard and narcissistic abuse, which is my other niche. And basically, it's where your job makes it so unbearable for an employee to work there. But they don't want to fire that employee because they don't want, usually because they don't want to pay like severance or unemployment benefits or, being sued or anything like that. They would rather just for the employee to quit. So they're going to make it as unbearable as possible. And I did a little post on this on TikTok, but I thought I would go a little bit more in depth here on this topic because I think it's coming up more and more. And I'm in California, and I've seen this quite a bit. Um, I've experienced this, I feel like, when I worked in corrections a little bit. And, it's never fun when you're on the receiving end of workplace mobbing. And so let me tell you a little bit about what goes into that. Your job makes it clear that they don't want you there. Typically, supervisor or upper level management is very clear that they do not have a high opinion of you. They have this animosity towards you, and that animosity can be definitely, it can be aggressive, it can be passive aggressive, it can be where there's like this micro aggressiveness. It can come across as like micromanaging or being overly punitive for, they could be overly punitive towards you when they kind of overlook that with everybody else. So, for example, if everybody else comes in 5 minutes late and you come in 5 minutes late, nobody's getting dinged for it, but you. You didn't dot an I or you didn't cross a T in your report, so you're getting dinged. Well, meanwhile, everybody else just copy and pasted the same report for the past 2 weeks, and nobody else is getting dinged for it. And so, all these little infractions are adding up, right? They are building a case against you, and it is very clear that you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You got a target on your back, and it's like you're not a good employee. They're calling you out at meetings. They are saying maybe you made some mistakes that maybe you didn't make, and there's nothing you can do to change the narrative. So you can't work longer hours. You cannot write better reports. You cannot come in early. You cannot be more helpful. There's nothing like that. They're going to build and build and build, and so you may get like a PIP, those sorts of things where it's like, okay, well, now it's getting really bad, right? Because now this is something in writing that's saying that like you're not doing your job well enough or you're just a bad employee, right? And so it's like, okay, well, they're just stacking things against you. And you know, a job can be a person's livelihood during any time of the year, really, but especially now, um, now when, you know, everything that's going on with the current administration, companies are closing up shop, people are doing mass layoffs. So people are feeling, very desperate, and it could really cause someone to spiral when they kind of go through this. And I'll be honest with you, I've worked a few jobs in my lifetimes where I've seen people, snap at the job. I've seen people who maybe have brought a knife to work. I've been in a job where managers had to call security to come in and escort an employee down because out of the building because that employee just lost it and like started screaming and wreaked havoc in the workplace, and they wanted everybody to know what time it was. I've seen it to where as an employee has slapped their supervisor when their supervisor, like I've seen people get cracking on their job, and just because like they are at the end of their rope and they feel like they've got nothing to lose. And I've even been at jobs where like, they have security checkpoints and I've seen people like jump, we might have had like 4 or 5 security checkpoints and they may tailgate and jump in there just to retaliate towards their manager. So this is a very real thing. It's a very contentious time for a lot of people, and then, people never forget, and so I think there's just like this growing desperation in people in general where people just don't have it. Like they're trying to get their bills, they're surviving on very little. And so any little hostility or targeting at work could definitely cause an outburst or an outrage from people. And I think it does something to people. People, naturally, can become paranoid when your boss is hostile, when your boss is like, they're giving you the silent treatment, or every day you come in, there's something. There's just this growing animosity when you go from pet to threat. There people are just like, shoot, what the heck, and you start to feel paranoid. And then, unfortunately, there's not a lot of support for people who are going through this. So, when you're going through this and you start to like, confide in other people, like your other employees that you work with, you might be like, oh, I think Miss Manager Bob over there is like targeting me. And they're just like, well, I did the same thing you did and they didn't care. So whatever. So they like minimize or dismiss what your concerns are, or they share with you how they're getting by with everything, with doing nothing, right, or breaking every rule. And it certainly doesn't help. So you can feel isolated, like you're on a boat all by yourself, and it is no fun to do this, or to go through this. And I think the other thing too is like, when your manager is like talking poorly about you, and that there's like some, you can't prove it, but you could feel like the tension when you're being talked about in a way that's not so positive, right? That you're being talked about behind your back, and that doesn't feel good. And it's like, I need this job, I can't like let go of this job. I got a family to feed. I got kids to raise. I got all this kind of stuff. But man, my mental health cannot take it here. Just some tips about what to do, what I did, when I was going through it. And let me tell you something. Even though I did all these things when I was working in corrections and I was kind of going through it, I won't say it didn't matter, but I would say it might have kept me sane, but there was still a level of pathology that I could not therapy away, just because your job is your job. And somebody said this to me, and I forget how it goes. It's like your job will have a bigger toll on your mental health than anything else, because you're spending such a great amount of time there. It will have more of a toll on your mental health than your partnership, than just, whatever, because you're spending so much time there. And I think that this is true, especially if you work in corporate or any sort of 9 to 5 job. Um, so I definitely recommend, if you're, go to therapy if you got EAP benefits, or if you got any sort of benefits where the company will pay for therapy. If you can, do use those. And with EAP, they're not allowed to disclose to your employer what you talk about or things like that. Go to your doctor, get a prescription if you need medication, take time. If you got PTO, if you need to take some time off, and, look at your options for taking time off, and do what you need to do to protect your mental health. Continue looking for something else, while you're kind of going through this situation. document everything that you're going through. You definitely want to, you know, keep a record on an outside computer or in a notebook, not your work computer. Um, don't your coworkers are not your friends, so as tempted as you may be to trauma bond, to share your trauma and hear their trauma, don't do that. Do what you need to do and get going, get on out of there. That would be my recommendation for that. And just kind of do your thing. And if you need to share, go to therapy, share with your family, somebody away from your job that's not connected to you and cannot, um, go back and report the things that you say. There may be outside agencies like, EEOC and things like that. And I would say to each his own with that. You have to be careful with that because sometimes, in my experience, those things aren't as private as they claim to be. Everybody does not protect against workplace retaliation, even though they say that it's in writing. That does not always work out that way. So do what you can to protect yourself and to move on. Start with a plan. Don't dilly dally on that, and get it moving. But I know these are tough times for everybody, but definitely take care of yourselves. And thanks so much for listening and or watching. You guys take care of yourselves and be well. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.